Welcome. This lesson is over how to multiply fractions. This is part one of our lesson. So in fifth grade, you should have been able to multiply whole numbers by fractions. Let's see what you remember from your fifth grade year. David bought 6 apples that each weighs 1/4 pounds. How many pounds of apple did he buy? Show me different ways to represent this problem. So one way I could do it is model it with a picture. So 6 apples, 6 apples, 6 apples. This apple weigh 1/4 pound, 1/4 pound, 1/4 pound, 1/4 pound, 1/4 pound, 1/4 pound. 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 is equal to 6/4. And we know that is improper. What is another way to say that? 1. How many groups of 4 goes in 6? One time. You are left with 2 4, which is equal to 1.5. That is one way. Oh, I could have shown work here. Whoops. Next way. So I could use picture model. Or what about repeated addition? This first apple weigh 1/4 pound. The next apple weigh 1/4 pound. The next apple weigh 1/4 pound. The fourth apple weigh 1/4 pound. The fifth apple weigh 1/4 pound. The last apple weigh 1/4 pound. 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, that's one whole. One whole, and 1/4 plus 1/4 is 2/4, which simplify to 1.5. What's another way I could represent it? So I did some kind of picture. I did it. What is a shortcut for repeated addition? Multiplication. 6 groups of 1/4. You should have learned this last year because repeated addition is 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, or 6 groups of 1/4. So how can I turn this whole number in fraction form? Remember, it's a rational number. Rational numbers can be written such as this. So 6 times 1 is 6. Multiply the denominators. 1 times 4 is 4. So we get 6 4, which simplify. If I divide both numbers by 2, I can get 3 halves. Or how many 2's going in 3? 1 and 1/2. Again, how could I have done that in my head? Or do it by showing my work? How many 2's go into 3? 1 time. What do you have left over? 1, 1 and 1/2. Some people prefer to, instead of simplifying and finding a mixed number, they leave it as this, 1 and 2 4, which simplify to 1 and 1/2. So is this coming back to you? Multiplying a whole number by a fraction? Well, hopefully it does, because today's lesson is just how to multiply fraction. Cookies! It's time for Cookie Monster! You ate half. So here is your cookie. You ate half of half a cookie. What fraction of a whole cookie did you eat? So here's half of a cookie. You ate half of this. So you ate this part. I ate then 1/4 of a whole cookie. So half of half is saying 1/4. Okay, you next one, model next one. You ate 1/3 of half of a cookie. So here's half of a cookie. Ate a third of this. I need to divide this into thirds. Let's see. Would this divide us into? Yes, it does. So I ate a third. So I ate this part right here. What fractional part is that? That is 1/6 of a whole cookie. 1/3 of 1/2 cookie is equal to 1/6. You ate half of 1/4 cookie. So here's 1/4 cookie. You ate half of this 1/4 cookie. So I need to cut this in half. So what's half of 1/4? So here's half of it. So that would be what fractional piece for that? That would be 1/8. So half of 1/4 is 1/8. You ate 1/4 of half of a cookie. Here is half of a cookie. You ate a fourth of this. So let's divide this into fourths. So I'm going to cut this into fourths. But I only ate 1/4 of this. So I ate 1/8 of a cookie. Do you know a algorithm, a shortcut on how I got this? How did I get half of half to 1/4? How did I get 1/3 of half of a cookie equal 1/6? How did I get 1/2 of 1/4 as 1/8? How did I get 1/4 of 1/2 as 1/8? Well, we are going to be learning that today. What is half of half? We are going to model and solve it. So here is a fraction square. So let's divide this into halves. And I'm going to shade this part in. So this is half of the square. But I want to find half of this half. So I need to cut this into, let's be a little neater, cut this in half right here. So using my other highlighter, would it be the whole thing? No, I need half of this half. So I need this part right here. What fraction is that? That is 1/4. 1/2 times 1/2 is equal to 1/4. How did I come up with that? I'm not really sure right now. I think I have it. I think I can figure out where the 1 come from. Is it 1 times 1 is 1? And I think the 4 came from the 2 times 2 from the denominators. You know, I need another example just to make sure I'm in the right track. What is half of 1/4? So I'm going to divide this into fourths. So let's shade in 1/4. Here is 1/4. I need to find half of this 1/4. Half of this 1/4. So I need to cut this in half right here. And it would be this right here. What fraction of the fraction square would this be? If I extended this line right here, wouldn't this be 1/8? So half times 1/4 is 1/8. Let's refer back to our cookies for our algorithm. Have you figured out how to multiply fractions yet? Half of half. Where did the 1 come from? 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. It seems like if you multiply the numerators across, you get this numerator, and you multiply the denominators across, you get this 4. Does it work every time? 1 times 1 is 1. Multiply the denominators across. 3 times 2 is 6. I think I got it. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times 2 is 8. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 4 is 8. So that is what we have. So our next one, sorry, we have a fire drill. 1 second. So in our next example about multiplying fractions is garden 1. The rectangle below represents Luca's garden. He will plant vegetables in 2/3 of the garden. With your pencil, shade in 2/3 of the garden. So 1/3, 2/3. So this is where his vegetables will go in this garden. Luca, let me get the highlighter. Luca plans on using only half of this vegetable garden to plant broccoli. Highlight the areas he could use. So he's only going to use half of this broccoli, but half of the vegetable garden to plant broccoli. I want to. This will be for his broccoli. What fraction will Luca use for broccoli? 1/3. How can I get this with mathematics? If I multiply the numerators across, 1 times 2 is 2, and 2 times 3 is 6, which simplify to 1/3. If I cut this right here across, you will see 2/6, or 1/3. Garden 2. The rectangle below represents Jason's garden. He will plant vegetables in 1/4 of the garden. Let's cut this into fourths. He will only plant vegetable in 1/4 of the garden. With your pencil, shade in 1/4 of the garden, so the vegetable go there. Jason plans on using only 1/3 of the vegetable section to plant broccoli. So let's cut this into thirds. He's only going to plant broccoli here. What fractional part of the whole garden is going to be for broccoli? It's 1 out of 12. But how can I do that with an algorithm? He's planning to plant 1/3 of the fourth of the vegetable garden, which is really 1/3 times 1/4 equal 1/12. Have you noticed that the word of is used a lot in mathematics? So far we've been using that. Of is telling you're finding part of something. So that means you are multiplying by. So 1/3 of 1/4, it means multiply. So the word of means multiplication. Think of it as 5 groups of 4. So it means multiplication. So now that we understand how to multiply a little better now, can we do this without modeling? What's 1/3 of 12? What's 1/3 of 12? Can you turn this 12 into a fractional part? 12 over 1. Multiply the numerators across, 12 thirds, or 4. Can you multiply 2/3 of 12? Turn 12 into a fractional part. Multiply across, that'll be 24 thirds, or 8. What's 4/3 of 12? Turn 12 into a fractional part. Multiply the numerators, 48. Multiply the denominators across. 48 thirds is 16. What pattern do you notice about 12? When the first factor, let me use my highlighter, when this first factor right here is less than 1, what happened to my quantity of 12? What happened to our answer? 1/3 of 12 is 4. 2/3 of 12 is 8. What happened to our quantity? When you're finding 1/3 of something or 2/3 of something, is the quantity going to get increase or decrease? It actually decreases. However, when the first factor is greater than 1, like 4/3, you're not finding part of something, you're actually finding more than a whole. So if you're finding more than a whole, you're actually increasing it, because 4/3 of 12 is 16. So we actually increase our original quantity. So this would be increase. So now that we kind of know how to multiply fractions, can you say in your own words, how do you multiply fractions? We multiply the numerators across. How do you multiply? Then we multiply the denominators across. And step 3, sometimes you can rewrite the product. Sometimes you can simplify if needed. In our last activity, you are going to be working in a group with chart paper. You are going to answer this question. What's Green Park? That is the park across from Walgreens. It's on West Green and Fry Road. It's rectangular. So let me draw a rectangular park. 2/5 of the park will be dedicated for the playground. So we're gonna dedicate 2/5 of this park for a playground. So let's divide this into fifths. So the playground, I'm gonna highlight what part is gonna be for the playground. So 2/5 of it. Where's my highlighter? So this is where the playground is gonna go. Woo! But 3/4 of this playground, so of this part, 3/4 of it, not all of it, only part of it, a fractional part, 3/4 of the playground will be dedicated for the swimming pool. So let me use my pen. So I'm going to cut this into fourths, and so I can figure out 3/4 of this part. Where's my highlighter for blue highlighter? So this is 1/4, half of it, 3/4. Oh goodness, you can't even sew over it. Maybe you have it darker. Better. But this will be the pull. What area or fractional part of the park is for the pull? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. Let me erase that. 6 out of how many fractional part? Out of 5 by 4 is 20. Or that's simplified at 3/10 of the park will be for the swimming pool. Can I show it using algorithm? So the park, 2/5 of the park will be for playground. Of this playground, 3/4 of it will be used for pool. 3/4 of means multiply. We're finding a fractional part. When you're multiplying by a quantity less than 1, the answer will be smaller. So if you multiply the numerators, call 620, which simplify to 310. Does our picture model that? It does. And that's just how you multiply by